Hey guys, how are we doing? And welcome back. So we're going to be going on with the first-person player porn series that I've had running on my channel for the last couple of weeks. And in this one, we're going to sort of wrap up all those things that we saw in the demo in the first video going forward. That's the muzzle flash, tracer rounds, and bullet decals, plus sound effects as well, and maybe one or two other little things when we get towards the end. So let's just jump straight into it. So we're going to prepare for what we're going to do by first of all making a few materials. So let's go to a little materials folder. Make ourselves a new material. This one will be our muzzle flash. So muzzle flash underscore matte, and we'll just open this one up. Pin him to the top here so we can all see. And let's just, to start with, we'll hold in 3 and click. Right click our 3 vector, convert it to a parameter. This is so that we can change color in the instance afterwards. We'll call this one our flash color. And we'll make it some sort of bright, energetic, yellowish, orange type of color that you might see in a muzzle flash. And then grab in our texture sample. So we'll hold in T and click for our texture. This will be our muzzle flash mask texture here, this little cross-shaped one that we have in the asset pack, which you can find in a download link in the description if you haven't already picked them up. So let's go straight on. We'll grab the our material attributes node here. We want to set our material domain. No, not that one. We're going to set the blend mode to translucent and our shading model to unlit. And then plug in our texture sample here, just our main output from the texture sample into our opacity. And then we can play around with our flash color here. So let's hold in L and click for a linear interpolate node. Use our muzzle flash as the alpha. This will control which values are going to be showing through in our texture. Black will be 0, that's our A input, and white will be our color here. So we'll plug in our color as B, hold in 1 and click to get a constant, leave it as 0 and plug it into A. Then we'll hold in M for a multiplier. S and click for a scalar. This will be our glow crank. So we're going to be multiplying our output values from our color and our texture here. Let's just set our default value up to something like 25. We're going to be multiplying the output of our lamp here by our glow crank and plug it into the emissive color. It's going to make it glow, as you can see here. If we set it to plain, yeah, we can see here, this will be our muzzle flash for when the gun fires its rounds. So let's hit save on that and head back to the editor. So let's right click, make ourselves another material. This will be our bullet decal underscore matte. And we'll open this guy up and we're going to need 2 texture samples here. So we'll hold in T and click, get ourselves a bullet decal. We'll just grab the diffuse texture. We'll duplicate this node with Control W and find our bullet decal M. This is going to mask out this white around the outside. And same as before, let's grab our bullet decal here, although we want to set the material domain here to a deferred decal. Okay, it's going to throw up an error because it needs us to set it to translucent. That's totally fine. We'll set the blend mode to translucent. And our decal blend mode here, we're just going to go debuffer translucent color. Alright, and the only thing that we're going to need to do here is just plug in our decal into the base color, plug in our mask into opacity. And yeah, well, actually that is all we're going to need to do. Very, very simple material. So let's, in fact, we can probably have a look at it. If we get our plane here, there it is. So that's our decal there. It's going to look a little bit weird in the preview scene here, but when it's on a surface, it's going to look just fine. So we'll hit save on this one and head back to the editor, right click in our content browser again. We're going to make one more material. This will be our tracer round material. So we'll call it tracer underscore matte. Open it up, and this one's also going to be quite simple. We'll set it to, what do we want? We want to set it to, I guess we'll just set it to unlit. Yeah, that'll do. And hold in 3 and click for another 3 vector. Convert this to a parameter, call it color. Easy enough. And set this, like before, we're going to set it to a nice bright yellow. Something that we can see in the dark. Alright, with that done, let's hold in M and click for another multiplier, and S and click for another scalar. This will be another glow crank. So just like before, we're going to be multiplying our color by our glow crank value here, which we'll set up to something quite high, something around like 50, and plug this into emissive. Alright, done. Because this is going to be applied to a mesh, which is going to make up our tracer round in our blueprint. So let's hit save on that and head back to the editor. So let's go to our little blueprints folder here. Let's right click. We're going to make ourselves a new blueprint class, and this will be an actor, and it's going to be our tracer rounds. We'll call it tracer round underscore BP, and we'll open this guy up. And this blueprint is just going to be very, very simple. We're going to need a we'll get a sphere collision quite simply, just a little sphere and also a static mesh, which we're going to make a sphere. Search for sphere in your static mesh drop down over on the right hand side. What do we want? Material sphere? That will do. It doesn't necessarily matter. It just has to be a good sphere that we can use. And I'm going to size it into our collision here, but I'm going to make it quite long. So it's going to appear like a streak in the air. And then the material that we're going to give it will be our tracer mat. There we go. So this is going to be the tracer round that the player sees when the gun is fired, and we can always resize these things as we go forward. It's not a problem at all. In fact, let's drag our sphere onto the scene root, so it becomes the root here, and we're going to add a projectile component, projectile movement. And so let's set up our projectile movement. So I was going to initiate some motion as soon as the blueprint is spawned here, but we get to tell the engine exactly what those stats are going to be. For example, our initial speed, we'll set it up quite high, something like 7,000. Our bounciness, 0. Our friction is 0. And down in our interp location time, 0.05. So we're dropping all these values so it travels in as straight a line as possible and with a speed that's going to make sense. And this will be bound to, well, the amount of times you'll see it on screen will be bound to frame rate. So maybe a lower value might fit, or even higher value if you'd like. Oh, what happened to our sphere? And all right, let's hit save. So with that compiled and saved, let's go to the event graph. We can delete these guys, and we want to grab our static mesh. Scroll down here to the bottom. Let's find our on component hit, and we'll get another one for our sphere, another on component hit. And we're just going to very simply just destroy this actor once it comes into contact with anything. So just right click. Let's get a destroy actor and plug both of these nodes into this node here. And just to make sure, let's head to our static mesh here. And then make sure that we check this little box here. Simulation generates hit events on the collision. And the reason that we're doing this with both the sphere collision and our static mesh is just to cover our bases when it comes to actual gameplay. So no matter what it's going to hit, whether it be the static mesh or our sphere collision, it's absolutely going to register this hit event and then destroy itself once it comes into contact with anything. So let's compile, save, and move forward. So back in our content browser here, back in our editor, let's open up our AK weapon, and we can start adding some things. So with all of our materials done, I figure we'll handle all of the sound effects first. I think we'll just add all of the sounds to our little weapon here before we go much further. So let's open up our ammo check. So this will be where we're going to play the actual gunshot sound. I'm going to put it in front of this play animation node. So we'll just drag off here, get a play sound at location, and then, well, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. We can either use a play sound at location with all of this stuff. It might sound a little bit strange though. You might be only hearing the gunshot sound in one ear because the sound is going to be playing wherever we position this location, and because it's the gun, it's going to be on the right hand side of where the camera is. Therefore, you'll only be hearing it through one ear. But you could also use this node, just a simple play sound 2D, where it's just going to play the sound out of the engine and not an actual location in the world. It's entirely up to you with what you want to do. I think for the sake of the demo, I use this play sound at location. So let's set our sound. The sound is going to be our gunshot sound. The location, if we just get actor location, just like that, plug in our location. And then we're going to add some variance here in our volume and our pitch, just so that it doesn't get too repetitive when we're hearing the same gunshot sound over and over again. So let's right click. We're going to get a random float in range, and that range is going to be a minimum of 0.7, maximum of 1.2. And we'll come out of this float here just into an add. So we can add a little bit extra, 2.5. We'll add and plug this into the volume, and then plug the result of our random float into pitch. So I hope this all makes sense. We can even add some attenuation and concurrency. We created these files. I think it was in the first video. Not mandatory, but this is how you can control the range of the sound and the concurrency settings that it has. Just in fact, we'll have a look. So let's go back to our content browser here. We'll go to sounds. Here we have our attenuation and our concurrency files. We open them up. you can see that we have all of these settings here for playing around with sound and concurrency. There it is. Don't know why it came up minimized. So that'll control how many of these same sound effects can play at a time, and also attenuation, so the range of the sound as it's playing. Okay, so let's head back to our event graph here, and here we've got our fire event, and this is going to be where we play our dry fire. Because we're checking ammo when we fire and only shooting if it's true. So if it's false, we'll come in here into another play sound at location node. And just like before, we're going to add just a bit of location data here. That will be our actor location. So we'll just get actor location and plug that in just like that. Although another way that we can do this, in fact, I might just rethink this as we go. So we'll head back to our, where was it, ammo check. So instead of actor location, let's right click. We're going to get the player character. I can spell, so we'll get our player character. And out of here, we're going to cast to our FPS pawn. Right-click this node, collapse it to a, not collapse, convert it to a pure cast, because we don't need to run it through the execution graph to do this. And then get our first-person camera, and get the location of our first-person camera. Get world location. Okay, cool. So with that, it just might sound a little bit better if it's not coming from the gun itself, but from the location of the camera. Just thinking out loud here. Okay, so back in the event graph, actually we'll grab these nodes, copy them, and paste them over here. I might neaten them up as well as we go. Saves on a little bit of space, so we'll just cruise all these up and plug the result of this world location into our location. The sound is going to be our dry fire sound. It's a little ting 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 when we're out of bullets. And then, same as before, concurrency and attenuation, these are just set at defaults. Also an optional step. I think I covered that. Alrighty, with that done, let's just compile, save, and then let's head back to our level here. We'll hit play and see how we go. Alright, so our firing sound is working perfectly. And when we empty the clip, we hear our dry fire sound. So that's all working just nicely. I mean, there's still no reload sound. We'll do that next. And we've still got our line traces popping up there. So first, let's go to our line trace function here. Set our debug type to none. There we go, compile, save, and we're ready to move on to reloading. So for the first thing we want to do with reloading is go to our animations folder, open up our arms, reload and in montage. And you'll see here that I've already added a couple of animation notifiers here. And that's as simple as just simply right-clicking, adding a notify, going new notify, and then typing in a name here. I'll just type in some nonsense so you can see it. So we'll delete that one because we don't need it, but we do need one. If we check our sound effects folder, you'll see that we've got here these 3 sound effects all with the prefix reload. This is reload drop, reload insert, and reload load. These are used for when the magazine drops out of the gun here at the first frame, the second frame. When we insert a magazine into the gun at the 19th frame. And then when we pull the slide back at the 35th frame here. Just a matter of lining up these notifiers with your animation so that they all sort of make sense. And you can slide these back and forward like however much you want, just to tweak where they appear. And then putting them to use is as simple as just coming back, going to animations, opening up our arms, and in Blueprint, finding our event graph, and then just adding the animations here. So if we type in and in notify, we'll see if we find them. Here we go. So we got, we've still got the nonsense one. It's alright, whatever. So we add our drop. We also want our insert. And we also want our load. Alright, cool. And we're going to need just simple play sound at location nodes. Our location being, we'll go our casted character. We will set this up in our first video. We want to get this actor's location and plug it into location. So we'll duplicate this node twice. One for each of our notifiers. Hook them up just so. Hook up the location as well. And then set our sound effects. So for our drop, we want our reload drop sound effect. For our insert, the insert sound effect. And finally, the load sound effect. All pretty straightforward. Goes to show you the importance of naming things in a logical and intuitive way. That way, there's never any confusion. And now, let's head back to our content browser. Back to our editor rather, hit play, And now when we hit reload, perfect. So it's playing 3 sound effects over the duration of the reload animation for the different stages of reloading. Absolutely perfect. Alright, let's move on. So let's just close some of these tabs here. Free ourselves up a little bit. We'll keep the weapon open. Close out animations. Alright, so I guess let's start by grabbing some values out of our line trace function. This is the one that appears right here. This is a line trace function. So let's just double click that, open it up, and then right click the graph here. We want to add a return node. So we'll just go add return node, and then we can drag outputs here. So for one, we're going to need to add this value here, our muzzle location. We'll call it muzzle lock. And we'll also need our impact point. So we'll grab our impact point, drag this onto our return node. Alright, it's gone automatically given itself a name, that's good. And then we'll just hook up our return node like so. What this has done is, if we go back to our event graph, you can see here in our function, it's added these 2 vector outputs to our function here from our event fire. This is so that we can use this when it comes to handling things such as spawning the decal and the tracer. So let's go ahead and make that function first. So let's go add a new function. We'll call this one spawn decal tracer. And it's going to need some inputs. So we're going to use the vector values we just got from our line tracing. So we'll go new parameter over here on the right in input. Make sure that it's a vector. And we want to make this one location. We'll add another one, another vector. Call this one, we'll call it the spawn transform location. Spawn transform lock. And a new parameter, third vector. This will be our impact point. Alright, just like so. So let's compile, and then straight away we'll just go to our event graph here, drag in this new function, and we're going to add it to our execution line here. Our muzzle location will be location, and our impact point is going to be both of these bottom values. So with that sorted, let's head back to our function and start building it out. So let's drag straight off our execution here. We want to spawn actor from class, and this is going to be our bullet decal. So let's come down here, where are we? Bullet decal underscore BP. Perfect. Let's split our transform node here. We're going to need all of these things. So the spawn transform location is going to be the spawn transform location of our bullet decal. Simple stuff. And our impact point, if we get our impact point and find the rotation of that impact point, rotation from X vector, and plug this into rotation, will be just set. Of course, the default size of a decal in the world is going to be quite big. So let's just set this value down to really small, 0.025 in all of our fields here. 0.025. There it is. All right, so that's all done. We don't have to do anything else with that node. We can just compile and move forward. The next thing is our trace around. So we'll come out of our spawn actor here into a branch. Now, we don't necessarily want to be spawning a trace around on every single bullet fired. I mean, I did for the demo just because, you know, it's easy to see. But let's see if we can limit it here. So let's right-click, get a random integer in range. Now, just move this out, give us some space here. We'll get a range from 1 to 10. And then out of this random int, we'll get a greater than. Actually, we use greater than or equal to. Greater than or equal. And for the time being, we'll just leave it at 0, just so it will fire on every single bullet, but we'll play with this in a little bit. Next thing, let's get our location out of our function input here, and make transform. This is going to take in 3 values, 3 vectors, location, rotation, and scale, and turn it into one of these orange transform outputs. Hope that makes sense. Let's just right-click here, we'll just move straight forward, get player character. Get the player character, cast to our FPS pawn. Make sure to convert this to a pure cast, just for ease of simplicity. And then get our first person camera. With our first person camera, we'll get our world rotation. Where are we? Get world rotation and plug it into our rotation. Leave the scale at 1. And this will make the starting point and the forward direction of our trace around when we spawn it. So out of this branch at the top here, out of the true, we want to spawn actor from class. And that class is going to be our tracer. Trace around underscore BP. So the result of this make transform goes into our spawn transform for the tracer. And we don't have to do anything else with that, but we can come out of here into a return node because we need to not just plug in the result of our spawn actor here, but also the result of our false from the branch here. This is because even when we don't fire a tracer, we still want the function to progress forward, to move beyond its execution. Otherwise, it will terminate here at this branch, and we want to do some more stuff following on from the function. So that's all done. We can hit compile and save, and then see how it looks in the world. So let's go back to our editor. Let's hit play. Well, the decals are working fine, but the yes, our tracers are rather big. So let's find our tracer blueprint. Oh, actually, we can just do it here. Let's we'll where are we? Spawn our tracer round. Let's change the scale down to like 0.1. 0.1. Hit play. That's better. That's much better. Except if we're noticing that the tracer rounds are starting sort of a bit far away, which they kind of are, we can pull this back, this muzzle scene component here, because this is where it's going to be starting from. Maybe even bring it forward, perhaps. That's a bit better. And they're probably still a little big. Let's go back to our function here. How about 0.05? Oh, what about 9? There we go. 0.05. 0.05. File. Save. Play. Alright, now we have tracer rounds. They'll probably look better when you have a higher frame rate. I guess while recording, my old PC is starting to show its age a little bit. But here's how we handle this. So these two nodes here, or even this branch, are going to limit the number of times that our tracer round is going to fire. So if I set this to 5, there'll be a 1 in 2 chance that it's going to fire a tracer at all. So if I stand here, see, it's not going to fire on every single round. In fact, if I set it lower, or even set it higher, pilot, play, see that it's not firing. It's not firing on every single shot, which is quite handy because you don't necessarily want tracer rounds to fire on every single bullet. So that's how you would do that. As for the bullet decal here, it's not going to show correctly on every surface at every possible angle. This is a very cut down way to do it. If you'd like to see a much more comprehensive way on how to handle these spawn transform and rotations for decals, check out my spray decals video where I sort of recreate the graffiti sprays from Counter-Strike and Overwatch. And in that video, I explore the spawning decals at proper angles and all of that, and you should get a much better explanation. But for the sake of time, we're just going to do it in this very simple way. So let's move on. The next thing we'll do is the muzzle flash, and for that we're also going to need a light. So that in our AK weapon here, let's add ourselves a point light. It doesn't have to be too special, but we'll position it somewhere up by our barrel here, and a little bit on the left side, so that it kind of flashes up in front of the player. So I'll just position this, I don't know, somewhere like that. I don't know, it can all be moved later on, and we'll just set the intensity to 0 for now. Let's compile that, save it, and we will also need to add ourselves a static mesh. Not parented to that, we'll parent it to just our weapon. And this will just be a simple plane. What did I just press? Plane. Mesh plane, that'll do. So let's rotate it, what was that, -90 in the Y. And the scale, we can lock this, and I don't know, 0.1, 0.02, I think, will be pretty fine. Just reset that to our starting location, and I'm going to put it in front of a barrel like this. So let's compile that, save it. Oh, I think I forgot something, because if we put our material on, that'll be our muzzle flash material. You'll notice it's only appearing on one side. So let's go back to our materials, open up our muzzle flash map, and set it to two-sided. Silly me. We'll save that. And then we can get on to making our muzzle flash show up when we fire the gun. Make sure we position this quite well, somewhere right in the direct center of the barrel. So let's go back to our weapon here, and we're going to use a macro for this, because unlike a function, we want to be using delays and other sort of time-based stuff, and you can't do that with a function. You can only do it in a macro. So we'll make ourselves a new macro. We'll call this one our muzzle flash. Boom. And then what do we do first? I don't know. Let's start with the light. So we'll go with our light. Drag off our point light here. We'll set the intensity to something fairly high. Can I? There we go. We'll drop our pin on the input here. Our intensity, we'll set our new intensity to something huge. 20,000, something real big. That's 200,000, 20,000. And then our muzzle flash static mesh, which by default, actually, let's set to invisible. Set it to not visible, so that we can come out of our set intensity here into a set visibility of our muzzle. No, not muzzle. We want our muzzle flash, our static mesh. Grab our static mesh, new visibility on, and then let's come straight out of here into a delay. We'll delay for 0.1, and then sort of do the opposite. So we'll grab these four guys, duplicate those. We'll keep a close eye on our little output node here. Hook this up, set our intensity back down to 0, and our visibility of our static mesh to invisible. Next thing is to, well, we can add some variation to our static mesh, some random sort of rotation, that kind of thing. To do that, let's see. Let's get our static mesh here. Set relative rotation. Hook this up. The new rotation is going to be, well, let's split it. We'll split this struct pin. Get a random float in range. And our range is going to be something from, let's say, minus 90 to positive 90. And plug it into our Y rotation. Because if we look at our static mesh, it's going to look a little strange. Maybe it's not Y. You know what? We'll have to have a look at that. We'll fix it up as we go. So with that done, oh, we can change our defaults maybe. If I, yeah, this might take a little bit of tweaking. But from there, we can also do the similar thing with our scale. Let's duplicate our random float in range. Set our values from 0.2 to 0.6. And from our static mesh here, let's get a set world scale. Set world scale 3D. Hook it up. Split this struct pin. And hook up this same random float to all three of our floats here. This will generate a different random float for each one of these three. Rather, it'll use the same float, but because it's a float, we need to plug it into all three of our scale floats here, scale transform. So we'll save that, head back to our event graph, and we want to grab this macro and plug it into the result of our spawn decal tracer. Now, if we hit compile and play, we should be able to see it work in the game. Well, the short answer is that it does work, but it is a little bit huge. I wonder if we can set our scale down. 0.02. We'll divide it by 10. 0.06. File, play. Much better. Although our point light is white, we could change that to a nice sort of yellowy, orange, muzzle flashy color. Compile that, save. Perfect. And there we have it. So we've got our shooting sounds here. We have our decals spawning. We have our dry fire sound for when we're out of ammo. Our reload sounds are working nicely. Oh, one thing that I don't think I covered properly. If we go back to our blueprints, we make a decal. I don't think we did. Where's our decal? Spawn decal. Yes, we need a yeah, right. Something I forgot from earlier because I used the practice one from before. We need to make ourselves an actor for our decal. So if we call this bullet decal underscore BP, open this up and add a decal, and just make sure that we set it to our bullet decal. There we go. We're already handling the transformations for our decal in our what am I saying? In our function here. But one thing that we can do is over here on the right we have our fade. So we got our fade start delay. Set this to like 5 seconds. This will control the amount of time that the decal is going to be staying on screen. And fade duration, this is the amount of time it's going to take to fade out. So we'll set this to something like probably also 5. While that's save. Yeah, my apologies for that. I used the one from my notes and not the one from where we didn't make one. Oh well, my mistake. I hope that wasn't too confusing for you guys. I hope you just pushed through. Anyway, that pretty much covers it. This catches us up with the demo from the first video that I made, including a couple of other things like the blood vignette. And I hope this was pretty helpful for you guys. It was a lot of fun for me to make. My next couple of videos will probably be some more sort of artsy, sort of less related stuff, but I am working on more. My next entry to this series will be weapon switching. I know some of you guys have requested that, so that'll be the next one that I make. Until then, guys, I'll catch you next time. Bye.